Hello everybody, my name is Vic Gilgis. This is episode 36, title being It's Nice to Be a Dafty. Now, that comes from my daughter, my eldest daughter, got two daughters, Michelle, who had said something daft on a WhatsApp message. And she said, "Oh, Dad, you're such a dafty." And I was really pleased about that because I took it as a nice comment about me. It reminded me of the film with Scrooge in it, Christmas Carol, where after the spirits had visited him, he dances around the bed and is in such a good mood. And he says something like, "I don't know what to think. I never knew how to think anyway. I'm like a child. I'm so happy." And so he wasn't really bothered about being serious and intellectual. He was just happy. And he didn't mind being a dafty, being daft. And I think there is something to do with humour in that. I think that is, we're not taking ourselves seriously and all the rest of it. And so, but let me get to the point about what this, and again, I forgot to say right at the top, as it were, that the purpose of these podcasts are to help you with your well-being. I hope they do, and I'm doing it to help myself with my well-being, because when you do something like this, you do pick up things, because you've got to kind of focus on it. So that's nice. Now, so it is really about labels. It is about labels that others pin on us and we pin on ourselves, that we think define us. And sometimes when those labels are not nice labels, we can get upset. I think you know what I mean, where somebody labels you as being stupid or not doing the correct thing, or labels you as being impolite, ignorant, things like that, when we like nice labels to be given us, like being kind and compassionate and intelligent. But labels are just labels. And I was talking to my next door neighbour the other day. We were having a coffee together, and he was telling me of the days when he was studying art. And his art teacher took him into the park and asked him to draw a tree. And what he said to me, my neighbour, was that it's the first time he realised that each tree is unique and different from another tree. So when you really study a tree, to draw a tree and paint a tree, you realise that everyone's different. And sometimes when we have the label tree, or we have the label kind, or we have the label unkind, we need to look beneath that label. It's like saying, don't judge a book by the cover. Do not, because you are the only one of your kind. You're unique, and I am. And we can't be defined by a label. We are much more than the label. And every time that we put out labels on ourselves, they narrow us. They define. They confine our scope that we've got. So we're certainly more than what we're told we are or what we think we are. Now, when I was a little boy, and I didn't get this at first, my dad used to tuck me in, not very often, but he did, bless him. And on one occasion, he started telling me a story about this little boy. And this little boy did this, and this little boy had that, and this little boy was happy about this. And this little boy, and I'm thinking, God, what a lucky kid. This little boy that my dad's talking about, I think he's got it made. Good luck to him. And then it dawned on me, and I said to my dad, I think you're talking about me, aren't you, Dad? And he just laughed, and I got the... so what my dad was doing there, he was giving me good labels. And we like good labels, and that's very nice. but you can see it could be a trap. Certainly, bad labels are not going to do us much good, are they? They're going to destroy our self-esteem, and we're the ones that can do that if we give ourselves bad labels. Now, I want to go on to bad labels now. And they are about not looking good. And where do we get the bad labels from? Well, other people, society, social media. Start saying we should be like this, we should be like that, and this is how it goes, and this is, where it's all at. And, we can look at all this stuff and say, oh my God, we're not like that, we're not up to that. We're not sure of ourselves. And so those are like labels that labels, why do we have to live up to labels? Because if we have labels, if we give ourselves labels, it's us that have made them up in the first place. Or if we are imposing labels upon ourselves, it's because of our psychology, our upbringing, the way in which we think we are. And it's just what we think we are. Doesn't mean to say it's true, and it isn't true. It's what we think. It's what we make up, given what we've been told, given what the media says, how things should be, how beautiful we should be, etc., etc. Now then, I want to give you some examples of this as well. I was in academia. After my engineering career, I went into academia, and thereby lies a lot of labels. Sometimes good, but sometimes bad. And I remember my boss, but the professor, and I won't use his name, but he used to introduce himself to the students, and I'll call him Fred Bloggs. And he used to say, my name is Professor Fred Bloggs. And of course all the students like, oh wow, he's a professor. And I used to say to him afterwards, no, then Fred, his name wasn't Fred, but I used to say, so when you were being christened, did the vicar say, I name thee Professor, Fred Bloggs? And he just used to kind of, I mean, if it had said, my title is, that's what I am, but not my name. And so, there we are, like living up to labels. And another example of this is that when I first went into academia, I was in Humberside, well, East Yorkshire, not Humberside, but it was called Humberside College of Higher Education in those days. And we were tasked with getting new degrees for the college off the ground. And one of those degrees was an engineering degree. And it was decided that it would be an ordinary degree. Everybody would start on an ordinary degree on the first year. But on the second year, people could go on to the engineering degree as an honours degree instead of ordinary degree. And the criteria that was decided was that if on the first year they got less than a certain percentage in their mathematics, because that was vital to be an engineer, good understanding of mathematics, then if they got below a certain mark, they could not progress on to the honours stream. And I opposed this on the grounds that one of the lads on the first year I knew, and basically he was one of the best engineers that I'd ever seen. He could take his motorbike apart and put it, back together again, working better than it did before you'd had breakfast. And I didn't think, I knew he wasn't very good or keen on mathematics. And I said, well, you're going to preclude this guy getting on the honours stream because he's not got your label in a degree of acumen in mathematics. And anyway, begrudgingly, what I said to the boss, he has the right to fail. You should allow him to go on to the second year on the honours stream, and if he fails the mathematics, well, he fails. But he should be given the chance because he is a good engineer. And so instead of having the rigorous mathematics kind of label imposed upon this guy, he was able to go on to the second year on the honours stream. And in actual fact, he did the second year, did the third year, and got a good degree, a good mark, a 2-1, I think. And it was honours. And so, if we listen to labels all the time, we'd be in a right blinking state, wouldn't we? So, another example of that. One day the boss came in, and this is when I'd moved to Nottingham in academia, and said to the staff, and I was one of them, we need more firsts. In our cohort, we're only getting 2 firsts, and we need 3 because the national average is more than 2. And I again raised my hand on this and said, well, I'm not stupid. If I give a first to somebody, it's because they've got 70% or more. And I'm very careful about giving someone a 2-1 if there should be a first. So I look very carefully at that boundary. So in other words, if I've given somebody not a first, then it's not a first. And you're asking me to look at the next category down, which is a 2-1, and move that candidate up to a first. I won't do that. That's what I'm paid to do. I know the standards. That's my job. And what it was all about was us looking as good as other institutions that were getting more firsts, or purportedly getting more firsts. Anyway, there was I lost the argument on that. I was overruled. But later on, in the education sector in general, so I'm not just talking about Nottingham, it was said, especially in the schools area, that the marks, the standards were dropping because there was too many people getting very high scores, and was it deserved? And so it went back into the face of the people who were trying to look good. And so, I just thought playing that game just does not work. Now, when we look at labels, and I am guilty, hands up, of being very judgmental on the, people with posh accents. I'm sorry, and that's another thing. Kind of a label which could be, your accent should be better, you should speak posher, and when the Downton Abbey series was on the telly, I wouldn't watch it because I used to get annoyed about privileged people who lived in big, abbeys, Downton Abbeys and things like that, and, where the money was and all the rest of it. And, and so, really, there's the latest film of Downton Abbey, which is the finale. And I'm not going to give any spoilers, obviously, but I did go to see it because a friend of mine said, it's very good, Vic, go and see it, which I did. And, I really enjoyed it. It was so good. And what it did for me, it made me think, because I learned, because I hadn't watched Downton Abbey before, why these people think the way they do, the way they are brought up to get upset about not looking right in society when, their American cousins would say, well, what's wrong with that? But they would say, oh, no, it's not par for the course, this. We've got to do things the right way. And so I learnt a lot about that. I learnt more about thinking it was me that had imposed labels on them, and the labels they'd imposed upon themselves was no different to the labels I'd imposed upon me. It's just the bringing up their psychology, their conditioning. And so that's what it's all about. It's all about, and labels can, watch the film. Labels can be very constraining and which they do because they tie us down. If we think we are what we think we are, we put a label on ourselves, and that label is not helpful. Well, we're snookered. Now then, going back to there's my new stair carpet there, brand new, smashing, and the stair carpet man, he was nearly finishing, and I asked him if he wanted a cup of tea, etc. And are you okay? And he said, no, I'm all right. No, because I think they get lots of cups of teas given them. And I said to him, well, you're doing a good job. As soon as I said it, I thought, well, there's a judgment that I'm not competent to give, because how would I know he's doing a good job? Because I don't lay carpet. I wouldn't know whether it's laid properly or not. And I just said to him, well, I used to be a fitter, not a carpet fitter, and I would know what I was fitting, like to do with aircraft. But, although I'm saying it looks good, I'm not qualified to really say. And he said, I've been doing this job for long enough, many years, and if I don't know what I'm doing now, I never will. And I just thought, the futility and the daftness of me saying, well, it looks good, because we don't know. Are we an expert on this? And how much are we an expert on ourselves? If the mind gets a picture in its mind about who it thinks we are, because somebody's put us in this category or that category, or experience has shown us this, well, we're not really, the mind is not qualified to put us in these categories. It is just what it thinks, and it is not in charge. The mind is not wise. The mind just draws some conclusions based on what it's been told. And it's like people who were brought up in bad surroundings, who are put down all the time, don't get any chances. They're bound to have a particular opinion of themselves and society, because that's what's happened. There is a lack of love. And when we start being able to see that and love ourselves for that and raise ourselves above that, because we are more than that, then the labels don't stick to us. And that's a good thing. Labels should not stick to us. We should be like Teflon, because they are meaningless in that sense. We can free ourselves from the cage of labels. It takes a while. When that cage door is opened, we may not want to fly out because the labels keep us there. We can't do this, we shouldn't do that. They said we shouldn't do that, etc., etc. And so when we come to the downside of labels, I remember my middle brother, when he retired, playing bowls as a recreation. And it didn't last long. And I said, why have you given up playing bowls? And he said, didn't you enjoy it? I asked him. And he said, oh, look, Vic, I really did enjoy it. But the captain decided that we were going to join this league, and to get into this league, we had to be better than we are. And in this league, there are different levels, and we had to move up the league, and therefore we'd have to do this. And he said it took all the joy out of it. And it's true, because as soon as we start comparing ourselves with others and climbing that greasy pole, and I'm not saying we shouldn't improve. That's up to us. And in fact, we don't need much willpower to improve what we're good at. So when we're enthusiastic about something, when we love something, in fact, that's often our blind spot, that we don't know that because we're just naturally good at it. So stick at what you're good at, stick at what you're enthusiastic about it, and don't worry about what the labels people put on you. Don't constrain yourself. So my brother all of a sudden was saying a label had been put on them that they ought to be in this league and move up the league, and it stopped the joy. It stopped him. Every time he did something, he was looking over his shoulder to say, should I be doing it better? Instead of just enjoying doing the thing. And that's what I mean by life, is that labels keep us in that cage because we are, that is who we're supposed to be. And, think of the labels of Protestants, Catholics, causing wars and division. And that's another thing, is we are all one. there is not an us and not a them. And labels do this. They say this, not that. Put the label on. You should look like this. You should be like this, etc., etc. No. And an example was, I was at a meeting with folk discussing mental health issues last week. And we were talking about how psychiatric conditions, how they can affect people, and how antipsychotic drugs can help or not help. And I shouldn't have got drawn into this conversation, but I did get drawn in. And I mentioned that my wife, bless her, when she was alive, was down as being bipolar. And I disagreed with this, because I was the one that lived with my wife, and she was no more bipolar than me. Now, don't get me wrong, there are levels of bipolar, obviously, so they can be very severe. But as far as I was concerned, and I said to the consultant who kind of gave my wife this label of bipolar, I said, she's no more bipolar than I am. We're all bipolar in that sense of, sometimes we're up and sometimes we're down. That's bipolar. But no, she was prescribed an antipsychotic drug, and which made her a little bit like a zombie. And I tried to wean her off that drug. So that's what labels can do, is they can not be helpful sometimes, and especially if we Google the condition and say, oh crikey, the condition is bipolar, and bipolar is, it's not very nice, then, oh dearie me, I'm not right. And no, we are often subject to life's storms. In nature, if we have a tornado over there, and we experience, a gale, we've had recently all these storm this, storm that. And it's terrible when we're caught up in a storm. The windows are blown through sometimes, the trees are blown over. I've had things in my back garden, I've had a greenhouse blown over, and it's terrible. But the point is, when the storm is over, things settle, and we accept that. But when we have like a mental storm, we don't accept that. It's nature. We do have mental storms, but the storms pass. And so, but if you want to stay stuck in the storm, well, you can do, and that's not very nice. In fact, when I finished my little rant, as it were, about, kind of how the situation was with labels like bipolar, and then being given antipsychotic drugs to treat it, which I didn't think were very helpful. One of the ladies in the class said, oh, Vic, having to be a carer for your wife like that when she was like that must have traumatised you. Well, there you go. I mean, I didn't even know, in other words, the question was, it must have traumatised you. I didn't know how to answer that, because I thought, well, I just got on with things at the time. That's what you do. And that is the first time I thought, had that traumatised me? Well, I wouldn't know. We all have things in our past, but now, I handle it as best as I could at the time. But what she was saying was, oh, you've been traumatised, and, sit down and have a cup of tea. Well, so sorry I'm going on about that, but there we go. Now, I want to mention the word duality here. Duality is labels, in other words, this, not that. So it's a label. So this is a good label, this is a bad label. Labels do start to put things into categories. And so therefore you've got non-duality. Now, when we've got non-duality and we're looking at this kind of area of thinking, then it means that if we're this, not that, there is separation. And separation, if we think we're not this, we should be this label, or we're given that label, there's separation from what we think we should be to what the label says we are or we think are. So there's separation. Then, so this is duality of life, that we see things and that is expensive, we can't afford it, we should speak like this or we should think like this. So there's a duality which always creates tension, and if the label is kind of exceeding our limits or appears to, then we can feel insecure. And that is always the problem with labels and duality. Duality brings with it insecurity. When we look to the way in which the mind tries to help us with it, the mind jumps in, it's trying to help us, bless it, and says, oh crikey, this label says you should be like this and you're not. Oh dearie me, what can we do about it? So the label the mind starts forming a strategy to help you improve, to match up to and meet up the expectations of that label. That's the problem with duality. Duality doesn't exist because in actual fact it's just oneness. We are just awareness, which is just one thing. And its point is, awareness is not judging. Awareness is just being aware. But as soon as I look at my computer here, I see it's a computer. But then, like, you don't know this, but an hour ago, I had a trouble switching it on because it needed updates, and I was cursing the thing. So when you start looking at your computer, oh, I'm fed up with this computer, that is a label. And so instead of being happy, just being aware of a computer, as soon as thought comes in, you're not happy because you put a label on something. And it goes to what I said in like the previous podcast, where what's wrong with right now, if you don't think about stuff, then there is nothing wrong with right now. Even if you're in pain, well, you can, hopefully get some treatment for the pain. But what can cause more pain is the suffering that is caused by thinking about the pain and how long it's been there and how long it might last, the past and the future. In the now, you're just aware. And so you are easing up on that suffering if it's not your reference point, which is it should not be like this. In other words, just be aware and rest in that in that beingness. So it's about meaning, and in other words, it's the meaning we put on things. And if you think about it, the universe, all these planets floating around in space, what does it all mean? What's the meaning behind it all? Well, the only meaning that is given to is by us. We say, this is the meaning. Well, is that the meaning? Is that what the creator or what created the universe? Is that the meaning? Is that what it meant? Is what we are what was meant to be? What's the meaning behind that? Well, I can give a meaning to it. You can give a meaning to it. Donald Trump gives a meaning to it. Putin gives a meaning to it. Russia gives a meaning to it, doesn't it? And Ukraine gives a meaning to it. Gaza gives a meaning to it. Israel gives a different meaning. What is a meaning? It's made up. Right. So are we going to hoist ourselves on that petard of meaning? So think about that. Meaning ties us down. It is a bit of a free-for-all. Are we going to get involved in fighting our meaning against somebody else's meaning? So what I'm saying here is stop belief in the narrative, because this is what gives the narrative. This is what the meaning, this is the labels. So look away from that. In other words, the more we focus on it and the more we give attention to it, the more this is allowed to keep alive, because that's what it wants to do. It sees us having problems with labels, and then it wants to keep itself going by helping us solve those labels when it is the thing that caused the problem with the labels in the first place. It is the chief of police that is causing the crime. So, again, what I'm saying is you don't have to think that way. You don't. It's as simple as that. And why I say that is because you don't have to think that way, because it is just a thought. And we are more than our thoughts. In fact, we are perfectly formed. We are perfectly okay. Innately, we're fine. But as soon as we start putting narratives on things, as soon as we look into our psychology, our conditioning, then that all goes out the window, doesn't it? But innately, when we distance ourselves from that, what is before that, what is before the mind, is okay. It's our awareness is fine. You're really okay. So you are not the I am that you think you are. You're not. You are separate. In other words, where is that I? The mere fact that we can observe that I that we think we are, in other words, you start to look at what you do and why you do it, that is the observer. You are the observer. Well, who's that? Is that another I? In other words, we are like a play of life. We are in the play. We see ourselves in the play. We are the director of the play. We give ourselves the lines. And there's another thing, is that when stuff happens, we react out of our psychology. Now, should we blame ourselves for that? Because that is a natural reaction. We're bound to do that. It's like a flower naturally turning towards light, the sunlight. That's what we do. Are we going to get ourselves guilty over being like that? Because we do. Oh, I shouldn't have spoken to this person like that. Or I shouldn't have done this. Instead, I should have done that. What we've got to realise is that at the time, in fact, we're in a way innocent, because we did what at that moment in time we thought was best to do because of our psychology. Don't get me wrong. We can look at what we've done and then say we shouldn't have done that and learn from that. In other words, be curious as to why we've done what we've done and say to ourselves, I think I get some lessons here. I think I can see what's going on. And the more that you examine, wrong word to use, be curious, the more you catch in the mind with its hand in the till. Because, somebody said, Bohm was it, said, thought says X, Y and Z and then says I didn't do it. Well, of course it did it. And if we've got to be careful about believing that, and in other words, and then always kicking ourselves in the backside, because that just keeps us more reinforced in the sincerity or the validity of that particular thought. We are not the I that we think we are. We are before that. We are just awareness. We are not that thing that has defined itself as us. And if we're not careful, we can get into this loop of the I, looking at labels and saying, oh, this is, saying we should be like this and we're not like that. So, and then we say, well, how can we solve that? And I said this earlier. So we're just looping around and we keep in that loop, and the more we try to solve the loop, in other words, how do we be better to be more like the label that we want to be, then we continue to be in that loop because we're giving that thought more attention. We are keeping it alive. The only way to get out of it is to basically ignore it or realise what the game is. Understand. In other words, understand what mind, consciousness and thought does. In other words, we have a thought and consciousness puts bells and whistles on it. So if we have a bad thought, blinking heck, it'll put bells and whistles on it. That's its job. So when something is nice, so we smell a rose, it puts bells and whistles on it. It's a fantastic a piece of apparatus that it's divine. Mind, consciousness and thought is divine. That kit that we're given is wonderful. But when you look at the way in which we naturally or unnaturally can use it against ourselves, well, if you want to dwell on misery, fill your boots. If you want to dwell on fluffy bunnies, fill your boots. But what I'm saying is neither is real. We are more than that. We can be content looking at the fact that a thoughts, which is duality, which is labels, can put us either up or down. Right. So, sitting with awareness is good. It's sitting with no attachment to labels. So we're free to change, to explore. And good feelings doesn't need labels. It just doesn't. It's just knowing that we are okay. We're built that way because we've got mind, consciousness and thought. Got the kit. And what pollutes it, what contaminates it, is our psychology. And people live in their psychology. They just love it. It's like the Jeremy Kyle show. She says that, he says that. Well, all this is going on here. So, the joy of just being in our awareness, to me, is like not talking to the wrong person. Our thoughts. And often we do get involved in these dialogues with the wrong person. And what I mean by that is, that person is not us. We are more than that. And when this realises that the game is up, it's been caught in the act. It's trying to help. I mentioned that earlier. But it causes the problem. And it wants to solve the problem. So, on the preachy bit, I will finish now. And I'd just like us to relax. And just to nicely drain down through the body in all this. When I say drain down, just go down. And when you've got relaxing, and as well, I would just say, thank your body. See, at the moment, your body without any thoughts is just looking after itself. All the cells are working. Blood is pumping, oxygen, the body, without you thinking about it, is just trying its best to look after you. It's just there, always on your behalf. That's why it's nice to try and help the body, give it some exercise, nourishment, good food, as best as you can. Exercise as best as you can. But what is nice is to be able to acknowledge the body, how wonderful it is, what it does all the time without expecting any praise. It's just wonderful that it's there on our behalf, just keeping us ticking over. And when you are aware of that and resting in that, that is so nice. The body now is aware that you're aware of it, keeping you going all the time. It has done since you were born. That's brilliant. So just going down through your body, relaxing. Just relaxing your scalp, your temples. Just letting the tension just drain away from the shoulders, just easing your shoulders just down through your body, down through your arms. Just a nice soft belly, no butterflies there, just relaxing. Just enjoy being laid or sat there, comfortable, nothing to do, just relaxing. That's right, just easy. Tension just dropping off. Your legs just relaxing. Your calves, your thighs, your ankles, right down to the tips of your toes, just so relaxed. Just enjoying your body and your mind doing its best for you, which is lovely. Knowing that your get out of jail card is awareness, that you are just pure awareness. You're not your psychology. You're before that. You are just life. You are this self that is there, just chilling, just relaxing, just enjoying this now. Not jumping into the conditioning of what happened in the past or worrying about what might happen in the future. There is no future. There's always just now. Your awareness in the now. It's got your back. It knows what to do. It's got the knowing of what to do. It always has had. That's why you are here now. Through all your trials and tribulations, you've got to now. So has mankind. So there is a knowing before the knowing of the intellect. There is a knowing of life for life's sake. Just to thrive, to be okay, just to explore. We can't explore with labels, they confine us. Right, so I hope you've benefited from that, and thanks for putting up with me again and my stories. My love to you all. Hope to see you again. Thank you very much.